Hey everybody, Tim Higgins. So we're going to do something kind of off script maybe, but kind of fun at the same time. So I have a customer who has a need. How do I put this? So this might be an extremely long video. In fact, we may have to break it up for a couple of days because it's going to be so long. So the need here is Broadcom has a product called Spectrum. Spectrum is a networking product, and they also have a product called PM, Performance Manager. PM's backend is called DA, okay? So I'm going to kind of just fly through this. What we need is to get data from their APIs to a CSV that allows the customer, I hate autocorrect sometimes, to allow the customer to view that data. Now, this sounds like it'd be a simple task, but it's not really. I may repeat this a couple of times. Like, for an example, one of the issues is the output is not JSON. It's OData, which is XML. So what we're going to do is we're going to use Python. Now, for those who don't know, I've been programming for probably about as long as I've been born. It's kind of a joke, but realistically, I started in C and C++ in high school. And then, of course, in college, my main language was C and C++. And then later that allowed me to move into Java and C#. And then I began to do scripting. And I actually started a little program at an MIT thing that really kicked my butt. It made me realize I didn't know Python as well as I thought I did. So I started studying Python. I've probably been doing Python for about 10 or 15 years now. So we're going to write this in Python. But what I'm getting at is this is not going to be a Python course, okay? So hopefully you can understand this, but I'm making this for two sets of teams. One of them is for a customer. For the sake of innocent, I'm not going to say their name. And another one is for a team that we have working with us that is going to do something similar to this. So I figured, you know what? Maybe other people want to do this as well. Now, with Python, there's a couple things we need to do, and I'm going to talk about when I go through it. But the other thing that we have is there's a handicap for the customer is they don't have the latest and they can't go to the latest. So we're going to be using Python 3.6. The architect is going to be older as well, okay? So they're running them on their Spectrum servers, but they're not the latest servers. So we're going to have to build some type of run script that allows them to run on older x86 machines, right? So it's an Intel x86 64 machines. The problem is we're going to be writing this on our Mac. The Mac has the new, I think I have the M2 processor. It's a very, very new Mac. It's what you're looking at here. So with seeing that, we need to build this in a Docker container that will allow the user, sorry, I can't spell, that will allow the user then to be able to run this on their machines. So if I try to build it on my machine, it's going to look at my CPU and it's going to build it for it, even though there's an application called pyinstall. I don't know how you pronounce it. That's how I pronounce it. Pyinstall, whatever. The problem with it is it really looks at my M2, and therefore it has issues converting to an older x86 and 64. So we're going to look at how to fix that as well. So my point is we're going to cover a lot. There's a lot that we can fix in this process. So if nothing else, I hope you learn from this. And like I said, we're going to start from scratch. Oh, and this is going to be a command line tool. Command line. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a settings file that allows them to pass in parameters into this command line. Even though technically the command line could be strictly parameter based, where you pass in through the arguments, but we're not going to do that because there's going to be a lot of them. So we're going to put into a properties file or a settings file that gets passed into the command line that then executes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's it. Now let's get started. This is going to be a Linux thing. That's why I was thinking. So there's not much of a UI we're going to build. That's why we're choosing a command line. But let's go and get started. A couple of times I'll probably show my password by accident, and I'll probably show the URL to the environment that I'm using. But don't worry about that. That is a test environment. It gets blown away quite often. So with saying that, sorry, I had to readjust, which was probably allowed. Let's get started. So first thing we do is create a new project, and I like to keep everything in my source folder. So I started creating one called export data. Okay. And we'll just call this export, maybe Spectrum. and DA. Okay. And a lot of times, like I said, I'll try to cut where I'm using my password just for sake of somebody being stupid and trying to steal my stuff. But it's really not that important. I wouldn't waste your time with that, mainly because we're going to blow that away. So again, I said we're using version 3.6. Now my machine, I had to download 3.6. That was probably the latest that I could get that still meets the requirements. I couldn't do, I say a lot, don't I? I know that on another video. I got to stop doing that. But I do have 11 and 12, but those are too new, so we can't use those. So we're going to go with 3.6, and we're just going to say, oh, and I created an environment. So if you don't know what this is, again, I'm not teaching you Python, but maybe we'll talk a little bit about it when I do it. If there's enough people who asks, I don't mind doing a Python thing, but there's so much stuff out there for Python. Let's go ahead and go into this folder, and we'll just say open a new tab. We'll get rid of our source now because we don't need it anymore. And this brought us into here. What this did was it creates this for us. Now, if you notice this environment thing, this is what it's called, right? So this is just best practice. What this does, it kind of creates a little pseudo environment for you to install all your requirements into this, including the Python. So when it runs, it keeps everything contained within itself. Okay, so that's what this does. There's a lot of great stuff out there that explains this. Like for an example, we're using 3.6. And so when I install stuff, it installs it into this environment, virtual environment is what most people call this, right? So that's what the ENV stands for. So, but it's not a true virtual environment like you would think about Docker, or you'd think about maybe, even if you looked at VMware, it's really just a contained little area here. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, I always, when it comes to Python, the cool thing about Python, let's just go ahead. I always start with an app file. Now, again, these are my best practices. How you do it is totally up to you. Not everybody programs the same way. So, whatever works best for you. Let me make this full screen so you can see it better. And if you ever seen my other videos, I love JetBrains. I've been using JetBrains for years. The honest truth is I probably should be endorsed by them, but I really don't do it that much. But I don't talk about it that much, but C++, I've been using JetBrains so I've been with ANI roughly 13 years. And so before them, I was the lead architect, or I was an architect consultant for Technicolor. And I started using JetBrains then because that was with C++ and C#. And the resharper tool was just so nice, right? Because as architects, we want everything to be consistent. And you want to go by rules. And that's the difference between a developer and an architect. Well, there's more, but that's one of the biggest things. So I started using them, and then I moved into using their IntelliJ for Java. Now they have C-Line for C++, their Golang. We have a guy on our team who just dies for Golang. He loves Golang. So, it's a good thing for it. And WebStorm, C-Lion is C++. And of course, Rust, I started looking at that. Rider is their C#, they're kind of their .NET version. But the problem with it is it still has to run, like you can't do older applications with it because it still has to run on whatever the core CPU is. So in other words, I can't do a Windows version on a command line because it has other requirements. That's pretty hard to get. So, okay, cool. I asked somebody to upload something for me and he did. So with seeing that, we're using Python. This is not free, but it's only like $200 a year for everything. So for a developer, you've heard me preach that you should have your tools in your toolbox, right? So most of our tools are Broadcom, but my other set of tools is also JetBrains, and also use the AI assistant. It's really cool. It's very cheap, but it's only like $3 a month, maybe, or something like that. But the trick is we're not going to use it here. We use by default it does use the IntelliSense, but I want us to write this with our own brains, right? So I always start with the app, and the one thing I was getting at, unlike Go and a bunch of other languages, Python itself does not have to have a method to start off with. So I don't know what it says. We'll have to look at that in a few seconds. But if I just print something here, like hello, Tim, let's just do hello, Tim. Of course, hello world is the default. What's up with my, let's see what's going on here, because the interpreter should be fine. 3.6. Yeah, I don't know why it's crying. All right, let's just maybe ignore that and see if it still works. What happens? Okay, it still works. Invalid Python interpreter selected for the project. It may be just because it wants the latest version, but the truth is I don't really care. Let's just uncheck that for now and just say, okay, there we go. Make that go away. And then if we have any problems, we can just recreate it from here. You delete this file. You say, one thing you go down is just click on this and you say add interpreter. If you don't know how to do this, add interpreter. And then you add the one you want. Notice it says the file's not empty because it wants to create it into your virtual environment folder, but you can delete that and do it again. Now, I don't use Conda. I installed it for something. I don't remember what for, but I don't use it because it has other stuff it wants to install with it. I just like to stick with Python directly. All right, so one thing that I do is I always start with a method. Oh, that's what I was saying. I'm sorry, I probably bounced because I'm trying to move fast. This is going to be a long video. But with Python, you don't have to have a method to start. You can just run it as a script. But I like object-oriented programming. Been doing it for years. So we're going to start with a method. Now, if you remember, we have a requirement to pass in a parameter of a file, right? So we're going to pass in a property file, PROP, misspell it all the time. Oops, can you not be nice and tell me how to spell it properly? There we go, thank you. And so we're going to call this, though, my config file, because that's what Broadcom calls theirs. Now, see, IntelliSense is pretty cool because we're going to do that and we're going to have that call our start. Now, what this does, just so we don't have any errors, again, I'm not going to explain all this. If you don't know what this is, by all means, ask me. But this is pretty much how you can start a Python app. And it's saying, hey, I have to have a main method. And this is the main method that you're going to start with. Okay, so these are set values that are in Python. Now, before we do this, let's behave nicely and let's put everything into try catches, right? But it's not a catch, it's called an exception. And I like to call this error just to be consistent. And then we'll just say, yeah, print error. Now we're going to do some copying. One thing I do also is I always create a folder called helpers. Now, it just helps me keep things clean. You don't have to do that, but I do that. Now I have two sets of helpers, but in this case, I'm going to leave it all in one folder. One, I have global helpers, which is kind of just system stuff, files, things like that. And the other one is going to be the classes that are for this application. So application specific helpers. Now I'm going to cheat. I know. Tim, do not cheat. But I actually created, let's go to here, our source. And let's open this up in a new tab. And let's go to, that's our application. What I'm looking for, shared. I create one called custom logs. So I'm going to copy it. Okay. And I'm going to paste it in here. Now, you can always create these. You can ask me about this. I can share it with you. I found it years ago and then I just kind of customized it to make it myself. The only thing, it's kind of like a log4j, but what it's really doing is looking for, these key features that you can put in there, and then it kind of writes it out. I didn't start this file, but I did clean it up for myself. Now, that is great for doing logging, okay? Pretty common sense. So one thing we want to do is we want to make sure here we have a consistent logging. So what we're going to do is in our error, we're going to create a message. Okay, our message should equal, let's go ahead and format this. Let's do unexpected error. Okay, and that should give us a comma. And what we want to pass in is error. Now, one thing you would notice in the newer versions, you put an equal sign here. In this version of Python, you do not. That was one cleanup I had to do. And then what we want to do after that is put in our type. Okay, so let's do our type error. Okay, so it was smart enough to know that, but it put one extra in there. So let's just go ahead and do that. And again, we're not going to print out our message. So I got to stop that part of IntelliSense. It's such a habit to hit tab, right? But what we want to do here is we want to do a custom logging.logs, if I spell it correctly. And this is going to be a log. The level here is going to be an error, because if you remember, and then our message, but it's not our message, it's going to be our, oh yeah, it is our message, I'm sorry. So see, it was smarter than me that time. Now here, a lot of this is JetBrains just saying, hey dude, I know what you're trying to do here. So we're going to import that in, and that works perfect. So if you remember, again, I don't want to waste too much time because there's so much more to this we've got to get through, but the name of the file is custom logging. It's inside helpers. And oops, I didn't mean to click on the one usage. And then we're calling logs, and then our log. Our log is log level and the message. And we have to match like info, debug, our error. Okay. And I put some examples at the beginning of the file a long time ago. I took out warning and I took out critical. So I don't think they will still work, but that's okay. I figured I was good with just the top three. Now, is there anything wrong with error? ER? Nope. Okay. So I'm wearing my glasses, and I hate wearing my glasses when I program. So it kind of screws with my vision, but that's okay. So what we want to do here is we want to go ahead and start creating this as a command line. Okay. So we're going to get rid of our pass. If you don't know pass, you have to have something for your method call. For an example, if I take this away, it's going to throw errors, but you can say this is a method and it's going to have something here soon. Okay. So let's go ahead. Let's start with a custom logging, and this is probably going to be our template. So let's just jump down here and steal this because we want this on every call. Okay. But let's go ahead and just paste that there. This is not an error. This is now an info. Oops. Info. And we're going to say just something stupid simple for now. Just say application started. There we go. Perfect. Now in our try catch, what we're going to do is we're going to create an args. And that's going to equal our system args. Okay. And that's good. And we're going to say if not args. So if not args, we've got to do something, right? Now, what I'm going to do though is, oops, I totally didn't do that right. I like this name better because it should be plural, not singular. Okay. Now, I'm going to put a test in there, but we'll come back and do that later because I don't want to pass in arguments every time I run this. I want to run it from inside the application. So that's a pretty nice little win-win that I'm showing you to do, is how to test your command line without having to run it in a command line every time. So, okay, so we'll come back then. And if you, what are we doing? So we need a parser, right? Well, let me think. Yeah, so we want you to be able to bring in, let's go ahead and call this parser. Parser, okay, equals, and we'll call this arg parsers dot argument parsers. And if I make a mistake, I know you can't tell me, but, oh, we got to put a description. Now you can Google any of this, but notice the little tooltip here kind of helps me a lot. So we'll say this is an application. Let's see, pulls data from Spectrum. You'll see what all this is soon. Spectrum and DA, or let's say PM. To a CSV file. Okay, so the argument is like, okay, so what do you want from me? And that's what the description is, okay? So now the next set, we have a parser. Let's say parse the add argument, okay? And this is, we want the user to say, okay, so if you pass an F for file, and then what we're going to do is that's going to be written out as file. See, it's kind of cool. It just did it for me. And it's even got this little section here, but I don't care about that. If you don't use JetBrains and if you don't use the tooltip pepper, then you're really hurting yourself as a developer. So, but this needs to change just a little bit. Help let's say, pass in your, do you want to call it properties? Let's just call it settings config file. Okay, and we'll make that in a few minutes. And then that is going to be a type of arg parsers, file type read. And then we want to make sure it can look at all the arguments. So we're not going to limit ourselves on arguments. Oops. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. That has to be, there we go. Okay. So if you don't know what any of these settings are, by all means, look up this, and notice it even added it for me up here. Look that up. Where did that come from? Look that up, and it'll kind of help you fill this in. But it's pretty common sense. So we're adding arguments. We want it to be a file. So what's going to happen is in the command line, you've done this before. You've done something like app-f and then file. Okay, that's what we're trying to create. All right. So where are we at here? Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So on the next step, what we want to do now is get these arguments in. They probably gave it to me and I totally missed it. Yep. Okay. So now we're getting them in. So let's go and do another log just for sake of tracking. Okay. And this is going to be, do we want to log out the arguments? Sure, why not? Args equals, let's put a space. And there we go. Okay, cool. That worked. And we could change this to debug, but the truth is, you know what? Let's do that just to be different. Why not? Debug. Okay, now I don't have a filter in there to say only show me info or only show me debugs. You could do that if you wanted to. Why we got IntelliSense here? Expected type logs. Yeah, I don't know. That's okay. We'll see if it works in a minute. So now what we've got to do is what? Well, we got to filter through these, right? So now we got to say args dot file. Okay, and that's going to. We could say file was chosen, but they know that because that's your only choice. Because we could put a helper in there, but let's just leave that alone. And if, let's go ahead and test it though. If args.file, whoops. I feel like I'm missing something. Okay. I don't think so. We'll just have to see what happens. So what we're going to say is if it equals a file, and we're going to say for file in args.file. So there are versions of these, and I hope that I've got this right. I'll just have to test it because I'm trying to do this off the top of my head. We're going to create a variable called settings file equals file.name. I don't think it's right. I think we're missing something. But then we're going to start it with our settings file. And then we need to log it so we know the file name. That's fine. We can do that. Let's see. So we'll debug and settings file equals, and here we'll just say file name. I guess we could just write this whole thing out, right? So we can just grab that since we're already using it. We don't care that it's a string because it's going to be a string by default. And then I'm kind of worried about this. I'll look at it in a few seconds. Let's see. The truth is, once that's ran past start, that would be the end of the application. But again, give me a second to kind of look through this. So we're logging it. We're doing a try. We're getting our arguments. If not arguments, we'll put a to-do here. Say run without command line for debugging. Okay, so we'll get to debugging. Okay, so we'll get to that in a few seconds. And then of course we'll pass on that. And then here, this is just going to do our parser. Okay, argument parser, add argument. So we're saying you pass in a -f or a -- field, and that's kind of standard, right? So if you do like Python 3 -- version, that should tell me the version, and hopefully if I just do a -v, oh, I don't know what that did. I think it put me in, but also hit insert. I don't want insert. Let's exit out of this. I think it's Control D will get you out. Yeah. Okay. Somehow I hit insert. I've never hit insert on the Mac. That's okay. If it becomes cumbersome, we'll figure it out. Now, so then we got our logging. Parse args, our logs. So our arguments type is a file type equals R. And then parse it. I feel like maybe I'm missing an import. Okay. Let's just run it. Why not? I mean, if it fails, right? So where are we? ls. So if we do Python 3 and we do that, what did we get back? So we got our help usage. So it's telling us to pass in a file. Cool. Error, the following arguments are required. So we got that. That's cool. That's our error message. When we said required is true. Okay. Now, so here, if we do Python 3 and we do app.py, I don't really have a file. So let's go ahead and start this. So let's do settings. Let's create a new, and we'll call it settings. Okay. Now in settings, we'll just create a test file. Test.tx for now. Okay. And we'll just say blah, just so it has some data. Okay, blah, if I could spell blah. Blah. Okay. So there we go. So now let's see what happens when we do that. So -f settings, and we call it test. Now go. Oh, so there's like a namespace. Why? I mean, we could just simplify this. Let's simplify this. Plus string args, AR. Okay. Wait, let's get rid of this E. That's probably my problem. There we go. Oh man, why didn't you guys tell me that? So now, Tim and his misspelling. Holy smokes. Okay, cool. So that worked. Ta-da! Okay. So, now what? So now let's work on this little piece right here to say, hey, Tim, we don't want to do this every time. And Tim, please watch your spelling because that hurts. Now here, Python is very picky about its spacing. So if you never know what space it is, it's always good to start on the previous line, just hit enter. And again, JetBrains will do it for you. So here what we're going to say is we need a settings file, right? Now settings file equals, now it's trying to help me way too much. We could do that, but I don't want to do that. And then we're going to start start with our settings file. Okay. Now, let's focus now on our settings file. So what this is going to give us, let's just do this, is what I can do now is, see, okay. I like to know where I'm at, method, and with seeing that, so print stop Now, again, the one thing that I truly love is that, yeah, I don't know where it's going with that. So let's just run it in debug and you'll see. So we're going to debug this. Now I can't debug this down here because it's a command line, right? So there's no args, okay? And now I'm going to step in and we're going to start here. It bounced into my logging, don't care. But now we stop. Okay, so that worked. So now we can miss that and just hard code this for testing. So what we want to do, let's go ahead and start our config file. Now, the good news is I already have one. You know that, right? So I've already written this out for a customer. But I'm going to stop here and take out my password. So stop. So I don't have to take out my password. I don't have it in there. So I created this file. And what this is going to do is this gives us the URL to Spectrum, my username and password. Okay. So I have this file and I created this one earlier. If you've ever dealt with Broadcom, I try to leave the consistency. Those are commented out. And here you have your value equals, right? You could try to do it with a colon, but you got to be careful to make sure the colon is not part of the values. But here, this is the address to Spectrum. This is a test environment. My username and password. Truthfully, as moving forward, you probably could encrypt this, right? But I wanted to keep it stupid simple for now. We need a target place to put our data. So we're going to create a folder up here. Let's just go ahead and do that. New directory, call it data. Okay, so that's where that's going to live. Where was that file? It was in here. So, and then the rest of the stuff I kind of commented out. We do have an idea of landscapes. I'll get to that with soon. So here's the DA. And then export JSON equals true. That's for testing. Again, the idea is for you to create your own and do however you want to. So I'm going to teach you how to do that. Okay. So let's grab all this, copy. Now I could just drag this over, but I want to leave it as is for now. And we're going to stick this into our settings because we'll remove that one. We're going to create a file. We'll call this settings.properties. Okay. And I'm just going to paste all that in there. And then I'm going to save this. The only thing I've got to do is go back and add my passwords, but I'll have to cut for that one. So let's go ahead and just, I guess I could leave that one open and we can work on that one. And then we could, we could work on this one while I cut the other one. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I'm going to say new file. Close. New file. Okay. So we can work on this one up here, look at this one, and then work on this one. So let me put my password back. So what I did was I created this properties file in the past. We're going to leave this one open so we can use it for testing. If you accidentally see my password, it's really not that big a deal because this is a test environment that gets reset almost every day. But at the same time, we want to make sure, I kind of just want to make sure I'm doing the right thing and keeping it safe where you don't see my passwords. Now, it's a test lab that doesn't belong to me. So with respect, I want to make sure of that. So now what we've got is we've got to now call this. Again, if you know me, I like to have something that's called repository, a repository layer. Now here, there's no such thing as a repository layer, but we're going to fake one. So we're going to call this settings repo. No, I don't like shortcuts, so we'll call it repository. There we go. Somebody may say, what is a repo? It's not your car. But so what we're going to do is we've got to get our logging in here, right? So let's go ahead and say from helpers, we want to import custom logging. All right, so that way we can log. And we're going to have a class. Now, this is where my programming is a little bit different. Our class, now the class is usually capital letters because it's supposed to be public just like this. But I screw up a lot. So I'm going to make it lowercase. My best practice for you is to make it camel case the correct way. Okay. Now we need to, if you know anything about classes in Python, it always wants to reference itself. Now, I don't use that, but a lot of people do. Okay. What I do is I jump down and start creating my own methods within inside this class. So even though I'm initializing the class, I'm not using the class as itself. I'm using a method within that class, and you'll see it when we get to it. The first thing I want to do is get the settings from the file. I know this is from file. One heck of a long name, but you do have to have a reference inside there. And usually most people use that as self, but I also found out you don't have to. Okay. So not that my way is always correct. Sometimes it's easier to get the job done that way. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab it. We're just going to grab this. Like I said, this is going to be our template. And we're going to paste that right there. And of course, it doesn't know what it's doing. So we're going to have to do this. And let's just do a pass so we get rid of our errors and we're good to go. Okay. The other thing I like to do, which I'm not doing here, is put the name of the method in here. So this would be like unaccepted method. And then this would be this, class plus method. So that way in the debug, I will know where to go to find it, but that's going to take some time. So we're probably not going to do that in this case. We're probably just going to go ahead and just say, unexpected, and then our whatever error message is. Now let's go ahead and get this. So the one thing we want to do is, since we have an equal sign, we probably can just read that into a dictionary. But before we do that, let's validate that it exists, right? So config, if it equals 0 or empty, then we want to probably log it as a bug. So let's go ahead and, we don't have a custom log, do we? Okay, so let's grab this up here. That way we're not. Let's go ahead and just put that right here. Boop, oops, boop. And we'll just say, this is getting, just so we know that it exists, right? We know what method we're in. We know where we're at. Okay. Okay, so here what we need to say though is, let's go ahead and drop, whoops, not there. Let's go down one. Okay, perfect. And this is fine, but what we want to do is make this an error. And we want to say, hello, dummy, you forgot your config file. Okay. Oh, there we go, perfect. That is cool. Because I did not know how it read my mind. Welcome to Skynet. All right, so now what we'll do is we want to get our lines. So we're going to put our lines. I did not know what it was doing there. Our lines equals. We want to put this into a dictionary, right? Or actually a list in this case. So let's say with open. See how smart it gets. Oh, look at that. It's not JSON though. It is going to be, what did we call it? Oh, properties, the word that I goof up quite a lot. So, and we want to, let's just keep it stupid simple for now. We'll just call it as file. So it's a good start, but you still want to clean it up. And then from here, what we want to do, say for line and file, let's go ahead if line. Oh, that is so cool. How does it even know about that? Huh. But that's okay. We want to get rid of our white spaces first. So we want one more level if line dot strip. Okay. And now we want to skip it if it's a pound sign, right? Because that's a comment, not a value. So if that, actually we want a positive, not a negative. So if line not equal, well, no, this is the same thing. So we're going to say not equal a new line and not line equal that. Then we want to read the line and split it on equals, right? So lines dot append line, and again, we're going to strip it out here. Strip. Okay. Strip is a method. So there we go. So I left out an R. That's okay. Oops, wrong spot. Strip. So what we're saying, append is going to add it to our list. What's wrong with you? I don't know. Do I have line in there twice? I do. Okay, so this needs to be lines because this is going to be plural, right? So that's why. Okay. Whoops, wrong spot. There we go. Okay, now a lot of this I'm making mistakes because I'm talking and trying to move at the same time. So what we want to do there is we probably want to go back to our 4 level. And that's the other cool thing too, is I can see that's really good because Python is really picky. I can now return our... So you have to return from the parent, okay? Because it's part of the class. So it's saying in this class, dot, we're going to want to convert it, right? So we'll write that in a few seconds. Let's write that method, convert lines. And what that's going to do is create us a method that, well, first let's reformat the file. That's kind of cool, but will it tell me to add method? Yep, cool. Okay, cool. So there we go. So it created this. I'm going to get rid of this though, and we're just going to leave it this way because what we want to do, wow, it went crazy on us, didn't it? Let's just go ahead and do that. And let's get rid of that. So what we're going to do is split our lines. So we can, let's do this. Start lines. Let's list data because we don't know if it's going to be a lines anymore. It can be anything at this point. So let's grab this. Never hurts to have too much logging. And then here, we're just going to say info. And this is going to split our lines, right? So here. Okay. We're just going to put that there so we know where we're at in case it errors out. And we need to put this into a try catch. We don't have to put it there. We can put it here. Try. Again, it's not a try catch. It is, but in Python it's called an exception. So that's fine. Ooh, what happened? Let's get rid of that. I must have missed this first line. Okay, and that's going to be, let's say here, there, and let's move that up and enter. And this method is not okay. So we're just going to, remember I said we're just going to use this as a template because I'm not going to go crazy, and I do want a space because I want that space there. Now it's saying, hey, you got to have something here. You can't have a blank method. So we're going to put this into a dictionary. So we'll call it that. Oh, I didn't mean to put a T in there. Okay, we'll put it in dictionary. And so a dictionary, and we want our dictionary to be split. D-I-C-T, if I could spell it. We want to split it on the equals, right? So item dot split. You'll see where I'm going with this. So there you go. It did it for me. So this is an inline way of doing it. You could just say for each item split, right? But this is an easy way to do it all in one. And it's kind of cool because, hello, JetBrains did it for me. But now we want to return this. I don't even know why I call it that. It's not important what it's called because it never gets used. Okay, so there we go. Now that's it. Now, but what we don't want to do is call this directly. We want to set these in properties. Now I'm going to take a sip of my coffee. We have an error message. What is our error message? Oh, it's probably has to do with centering. So let's do this. No. What's wrong with you? Statement expected. What? I think that was a previous error. Yeah, so there's some blank spaces there. Okay, that's just weird. Who cares? So this is a helper method. Technically, you could move this one. Sorry. Because, and this is what I mean by helper, right? So this is a method that can be used by other classes or other methods or whatever, just to do something. And all it's doing is taking a string value. So let's walk through this. This is going to take a string value. It's going to read each one of these right here. And it's going to say, hey, I have this, right? This equals that. So that's a string. Now, what's going to happen is I'm passing that string to this convert. I do not know what happened there. Not meant to be data. I like using the word data. So I got to put it right here. So what happens is it says, split this now on this equal and put it in the dictionary. So the dictionary is going to be key value, right? Okay, cool. Now, what I want to do is write some properties. Now, properties doesn't really exist in Python, but I want my code to call the property, not this, because we want to return everything as a dictionary, not as a string, okay? So let me phrase that. I didn't want to return it as a line and have my code parse it. I want to return it already parsed as a value. So we're going to say return values like properties, okay? So like getters and setters, how's that? Like, and if you ever done, you know, C++ or C# or, you know, Java, anything like that, they have getters and setters of properties. We call those properties. That may be kind of old school programming, but I still like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with one, call it export. Let's just go down the list, right? So Spectrum base URL, right? And then we're going to pass in, I'm just thinking how the easiest way to do this is settings. Sad thing is I did this before, but I'm not looking at my code. I'm trying to do it from memory. So that kind of, let's separate this settings from the other settings. So we'll start with an underscore. And we want this just to be a getter. So .get, there's a setting on, it's funny I said that because there is a setting on a dictionary called a get. So here we pass in the dictionary and then we're going to get back, what value we're going to get back. Oh, this would be this one, right? Okay. And then we can just highlight that and do this, and that will surround it with equals. So what I'm probably going to do is stop the video and just do the rest of these, just so you don't have to watch me. And then we'll talk about it when I'm done.